The stallion's scream shattered the morning hush. Hooves thundered through the mist as 3 riders vanished into the tree line, trailing her last hope behind them, her husband's horse, the one he died protecting. May stood barefoot in the frost, shotgun dangling at her side, not a shell left in it. Smoke still curled from the porch rafters where the men had torched her roof for sport. One of them laughed as he rode off, a high cackle that twisted in her gut. They hadn't taken her life, they took worse. They took her pride, and the last piece of him she had left. But they didn't know the mountain, didn't know its switchbacks, its sudden drops. Didn't know that May was born with red clay in her veins and lungs full of thin, high air. That. Before her name was Widow Kelton, it was Ghostlegs May, the girl who once ran the ridge faster than any mule could climb it. She dropped the empty gun, then she ran, past the blood on her steps. Past the hollow barn, into the trees, barefoot and breathless, heart cold and eyes burning. They thought they'd stolen from a widow. They didn't know she was coming for them. Before we jump back in, introduce yourself and let me know where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches something in you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special just for you. The town of Bitter Ridge wasn't much more than a scar on the landscape. 1 main street, 2 saloons, and a post office that rarely saw a letter worth reading. Dust rolled in from the plains like it was born angry, coating windows and boots and hearts in equal measure. Folks didn't talk much here, and when they did, it was in whispers, glances, and the occasional spit into the dirt to show just what they thought of a person. May Kelton had learned to live in that silence. Her cabin sat 3 miles up from the town, tucked into a bend of the mountain trail where the pines started to thin. She came down twice a month, once for supplies, once for post, though she rarely got either without a delay or a sideways comment. Some claimed she cursed the store's milk just by standing too close. Others said her voice could freeze a man's blood, though none had heard her speak since her husband died 2 winters ago. What they didn't say out loud was what really bothered them. The scar running from her ear to her collarbone wasn't what made them stare, it was what came with it. May Kelton hadn't heard a sound in nearly 5 years. The accident took her hearing. A runaway logging cart on the North Trail, iron wheels and split pine barreling downhill too fast. Her husband had dragged her clear, but the blast that followed sent a shard of rail into her neck and left her world in silence. They buried him that winter, frozen ground, hollow prayers, and ever since, May moved like a ghost through the town, reading lips, watching eyes, whispers. Followed her like smoke. She don't cry, you notice that? Reckon she went crazy up in that cabin. You'd go mad too, all alone, nothing but snow and wind to talk to. They were half right. She hadn't cried in years, not when the roof caved in after a storm, not when the last of the hens was taken by a coyote, not even when her fingers blackened with frost from fetching firewood after a late freeze. Grief had frozen solid inside her, and the truth was, she liked it better that way. People's words, their half-pity and sideways fear, hadn't done her any good in town. She preferred the language of trees. The mountain didn't flinch at her face, didn't gossip behind hands. It let her run wild. She'd take her boots off at the trailhead and let the earth guide her. She knew every rock, every slope, every breath of cold air that came before the first snowfall. But isolation came with a cost. The horse, her last connection to what she had before, wasn't just a mount. He was the one thing that had stood beside her when everything else had crumbled. His name was Flint, a coal-black stallion with a white blaze and a hatred for strangers. Her husband had trained him with patience and hands that could calm thunder. Losing Flint would be like losing him all over again, so when the outlaws came, but we're not there yet. Back then, in the slow days of winter's retreat, May spent her mornings splitting wood and her afternoons pacing the ridgeline with Flint close behind. She'd talk to him sometimes, not that he understood, but her voice felt different with him around. Less like a memory, more like a tether. Her nights were long. No music, no voices on the wind, only the burn of firelight and the flicker of shadows on log walls. Sometimes she'd press her hand to her throat and hum, not for sound, but for the way it vibrated in her chest. A reminder that something still moved inside her. Sometimes she dreamt of footsteps on the porch, not friendly ones. There were always rumors in Bitter Ridge, bandits moving through, travelers vanishing, sightings of smoke in canyons that should have been empty. And lately, folks had been extra careful to lock their doors. Not that they ever warned May. She was an afterthought at best, a cursed woman in a cabin nobody visited. So when trouble finally came, it didn't come quietly. Before we dive deeper into the story, just a quick note. I'm Thomas, the voice behind this narration. If you enjoy how it sounds, let me know in the comments so we can keep the same voice in future videos. The day started like any other. A brittle sun clawed through the trees, snow melting in clumps off pine branches, and May was stacking logs outside the shed. Flint nickered nearby, sensing something she didn't. He always knew before she did. Danger, weather, even people. She glanced down the path. No one. Then again, she couldn't hear. She kept working. It wasn't until she turned and saw Flint's ears pinned back, his nostrils flaring, that her heart stuttered. She moved quickly, grabbing the old shotgun from the porch wall. Loaded, 2 shells. She could barely aim anymore, vision not what it used to be, but the sight of it alone was usually enough to turn most men away. Not these ones. They came through the trees fast, dirty coats and red eyes from too many nights drinking in cold camps. 3 of them, all on horseback. One dismounted, smiling like he already owned the place. May raised the gun. He didn't flinch. Said something she couldn't hear. She read his lips, or tried to, but the words were muddy, slurred. Something about payment, something about Flint. She stepped back, raised the gun higher. He lunged. She fired once, missed wide. The blast echoed in her chest, but no sound reached her ears. She could feel the vibration, but not the chaos. Another man jumped the fence. Flint reared, kicked, but they were fast. Ropes flew. The third man cracked her across the face before she could load another shell. She woke up to smoke on the wind and blood in her mouth. The barn was smoldering. The gun was gone. So was Flint. They'd left her a message, carved into the door. You got nothing left now, widow. And for a few moments, it was true. She sat on the porch, shaking, ash falling in her lap, and stared at the mountain trail. No tears, no screaming. Just a numbness that wrapped around her ribs like iron bands. Then she stood. Because they'd taken something they shouldn't have. Not the horse, but the last piece of warmth she'd held on to. And what the men of Bitter Ridge had forgotten was that grief carves a woman hollow, but in that hollow space, something dangerous can grow. She slipped off her boots. The earth was cold, but she ran anyway. The wind changed 3 days after they took Flint. May felt it in her bones before the trees even moved, an odd stillness in the pines, the kind that warned of something watching. It wasn't snow. It wasn't rain. It was something waiting. She'd been tracking the outlaws without sleep. No food but cold biscuits and creek water. They thought they'd vanish into the hills, but she knew the back trails like breath, in her lungs. Still, 3 nights alone on the mountain wore thin. Her muscles burned. Her limp, old and forgotten, had started to gnaw at her again. So she came down. Not to the town. Not quite. Just close enough to gather what she needed. She walked into Grady's feed shop near sundown, hood pulled low, eyes wary. The bell above the door rang out like a pistol shot in her mind, though she couldn't hear it. She moved slow, careful, grabbing salt, oats, jerky, whatever she could carry. She didn't look at anyone, didn't need to. She knew the stairs would be there, but someone else was watching. He stood near the shelves, hat in hand, eyes like stormlight. Not young, not old. A dust-worn coat, a scar over one brow, and boots that had seen years of road behind them. He wasn't from Bitter Ridge. That much was clear. May noticed him before he noticed her. But when he did, he didn't flinch, didn't whisper, didn't look away. Their eyes held for a second too long. Something shifted. Small, quiet. But it lodged in May's ribs like a spark. She moved to pay and leave, but he stepped forward, slow, respectful. Not to stop her, just close enough for her to read his lips. "You ride with Flint?" She froze. Her hand gripped the counter. The stranger saw it, the flicker of pain, recognition. And he didn't smile, didn't push, he just nodded. "I saw 3 men riding hard toward Dead Man's Hollow," he said. "One horse didn't fit." May swallowed hard. She nodded once. He opened his mouth to say more, but the shopkeeper, Grady, cleared his throat with a snort loud enough for even her to notice. "We don't need drifters poking in widow business," Grady muttered. May didn't answer. She took her sack and turned, but the man was already moving gently. "Name's Ellis," he said. "If you're going after them, I'll ride with you." She paused, looked at him like he was a puzzle with a missing piece. No one had offered help in years, certainly not a stranger. She shook her head slowly, but not because she didn't want him to come, because she didn't know if she could trust wanting anything at all anymore. They left that night. She waited till the stars settled, then found him saddling a horse near the old rail shack. He said nothing when she approached, only handed her a flask. She shook her head. He nodded. No need for words. They understood something in each other. Loss, maybe. Silence. Wounds left open too long. They rode without speaking, only the moon guiding their way through dry canyons and frozen switchbacks. May moved like the wind, ghost quick through scrub and slope. Ellis followed, letting her lead. He didn't try to catch up, didn't challenge her, and she didn't stop him. At the river's edge, they rested. She crouched near the water, fingers skimming the surface. He stayed back, unspeaking. Then, after a long while, he said, "Do you miss sound?" She looked at him, long and hard, then nodded, but only once. He waited. "I miss his voice," she said. Her own voice, hoarse and dry like wind through dead leaves. Ellis didn't answer right away, just nodded. "Sometimes," he said, "I still dream of my sister singing. Woke up once with blood in my throat from biting my tongue trying to keep the sound." May turned to him slowly. Not pity, understanding. Something in her softened. She opened her mouth. "Why help me?" He shrugged. "Some men steal horses. Others help chase them down." "That simple?" "No. But it's late." They both smiled faintly. Almost. Back in town, the wind shifted again. Grady told the sheriff May was riding with a stranger, said she was bringing trouble back to their doorstep, said women like her didn't forget old grudges, didn't forgive the way Bitter Ridge turned its back on her. Whispers flared into warnings. "She's gonna bring blood down from those hills. She'll lead them right to our doors." But the sheriff, old and tired, only said, "If she rides for a reason. You boys better hope she finds them before they come back." The trail twisted sharper near Dead Man's Hollow, cliffs rising high like jagged teeth. May crouched beside a fire pit, long gone cold. Ash, boot prints, a broken spur, Flint's hoof prints among them. "They stopped here," she said. Ellis crouched beside her. "One of 'em's limping, bad, could catch him by dawn." May stood. Ellis caught her arm. "You sure you're ready?" She looked down at his hand, rough, scarred, then up at his face. "No," she said, "but I don't need to be." They moved fast after that. The moon dipped low. The stars burned, colder. And May felt something strange rising in her chest. Not rage, not revenge. Hope. It scared her more than any gun ever had. They reached the canyon pass just before dawn. Smoke curled up from below, thin and gray. The bandits had made camp, in a ravine with a view of the road east. May crouched behind a boulder, eyes locked on Flint. He was tied loosely, pacing. Ellis whispered, "I can flank left." "No," May signed, quick and firm. "I'll draw their eye." "And get shot?" He smiled. "You trust me?" She hesitated. Then, one slow nod. He disappeared, into the brush. May waited, heart pounding, muscles coiled, and when the first shout rang out, she moved like thunder, gun drawn, feet light, death silent. It wasn't over yet, but it had begun. The ambush came after Flint was freed. May had cut the rope clean through, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer weight of holding her breath too long. She'd barely whispered his name, barely touched his muzzle before the canyon rang out with gunfire. Ellis shouted from somewhere in the dark. One outlaw dropped. She saw him fall from the ridge, lifeless. Another fired wide and ran into the scrub. But the third, he didn't run. He waited. A man with a crooked nose and a jagged scar across his chin. Outrun, their leader. The same one who'd cracked May across the face when they stole her horse. Now he stood atop a rock like a king of fools, gun drawn, firelight flickering in his eyes. "You thought we wouldn't see you coming?" he snarled. "I wanted you to follow us." May raised her shotgun, but her hand wavered. She only had one shell left and he knew it. He laughed. "Whole damn town thinks you're some ghost," he said, circling slowly. "But ghosts don't bleed." He lunged. She fired. Click empty. He grinned. May reached for her knife, but he was faster, rushed her, knocked her down, pinned her in the dirt. His weight crushed the air from her lungs. His hand closed around her wrist. And then, nothing. A dull thud. A grunt. He toppled sideways. "Ellis!" He didn't gloat, didn't speak. Just stood there, breathing hard, one boot pressed against Outrun's chest to make sure he didn't get up again. May rolled over, coughing, her vision blurred. The world spun. She tried to stand. Failed. "Don't," Ellis said, kneeling beside her. "You're bleeding." She touched her temple. Warm. Wet. And then, darkness. The snow was falling by the time she woke. Her coat was wrapped around her like a shroud. A small fire flickered nearby. Ellis sat close, head bowed, watching the wind instead of her. Flint stood tied to a tree, nickering softly. She sat up too fast. Ellis turned. "Easy." May looked around, heart racing. "Where?" "We're half a mile from the canyon," he said. "I carried you. Left the bodies for the crows." She looked away. Ashamed. "I should have been ready," she said. He was waiting." "You didn't fail," he said, quiet. She shook her head. "I let it happen." Again. Ellis didn't argue. He just reached into his coat and handed her something. A locket. Her husband's. She hadn't even noticed it was gone. Outrun must have taken it when he struck her. To her, it was just metal. But it felt like breath returning. She clutched it hard, then whispered, "Why?" Ellis blinked. "Why what?" "Why help me?" He stared into the fire a long while, then said, "Because I know what it's like, when no one believes you're worth saving." They stayed by the fire until dawn. Flint dozed nearby. Ellis tended the wound on her temple without speaking. His hands were rough, but his touch wasn't. No questions, no pity, just presence. That night, the mountain felt less cruel. But the cruelty came anyway. The next morning, they rode into Bitter Ridge. She shouldn't have. She knew better. But Ellis said the sheriff wanted to hear what happened, that the town deserved to know the truth. May didn't care about the town. But maybe, just maybe, he was right. So she came, with Flint at her side, with dried blood on her coat. The townsfolk watched her like she'd ridden in trailing fire. The sheriff met her at the edge of the post office, stiff-backed and cold-eyed. She handed over the locket, told him about Outrun, about the ambush. He listened, then said nothing. Not, "Thank you." Not, "Well done." Just a nod. Then Grady stepped forward, voice loud, arms crossed. "You expect us to believe her? After what she did?" May stared at him. "What did I do?" she asked. He spat in the dust. "You cursed this town with your silence. You brought killers here. Should have let 'em take the damn horse." A murmur rose in the crowd. "She's trouble. Always has been. Always. Will be." And then, Someone grabbed her arm, twisted it, pulled her forward. A man she didn't recognize, young, angry, drunk on group hatred. "She ain't gonna walk out of here like she's a hero," he growled. She shoved him back, hard. He stumbled. Ellis stepped between them fast, fists clenched, but it was too late. The crowd surged, not fists, just fury, just venom. And the sheriff, too tired to fight them, turned his back. They didn't hurt her badly. Not enough to break bones. Just enough to humiliate her, to remind her she didn't belong. They shoved her out of town with curses in her wake. Threw her saddlebag into the street behind her. Ellis followed, quiet, angry. She didn't speak for miles. They camped again in silence. May didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't even tend to Flint. She just sat beneath a blackened tree, staring at the flame like it owed her something. Ellis didn't push, didn't even try to comfort. He just sat nearby, and after what felt like hours, he said, "You don't owe them anything." May didn't look at him. "I don't owe anyone anything," she said. "And no one owes me." She stood, walked into the snow, farther and farther until her legs gave out. She collapsed. The snow caught her softly, like a mother's arms, and for a moment, she let it all go. The strength, the rage, the stubborn fire that had kept her breathing all these years. Gone. Let the mountain take her, she thought. Let the wind cover her tracks. Let the world forget. But there he was. Not running, not yelling, just kneeling beside her. Ellis didn't lift her, didn't beg, just took off his coat, wrapped it around her, and sat beside her in the cold. "You're not broken," he said. She didn't answer. "I've seen broken. You're still here." "I don't want to be," she whispered. "Then I'll sit with you. Until you do." She cried. For the first time in 5 years, no sound, just tears freezing to her cheeks. He never looked away. They stayed in the snow until morning. She rose on her own, walked back to camp on her own. Flint met her at the edge of the firelight. She pressed her forehead to his, whispered, "They thought I was broken." Ellis sat beside the fire, waiting. She turned to him. But someone saw gold in the ashes. The fire didn't return all at once. It came in sparks, flickers of warmth in frozen mornings, the slow melting of distrust, the way Flint nickered softly each time he saw her rise with purpose in her step. May had stopped asking herself why. Ellis stayed. He never offered some grand story. He just showed up. Every sunrise, every chore, every silence. They built the fence together first. A jagged line of cedar posts across the old plot behind her cabin, the one choked with thistle and memory. Ellis brought the lumber. She brought the sweat. Each stake driven into the ground was a kind of reclamation. One nail at a time, she took back what Bitter Ridge tried to shame out of her. Some days they talked about wood grain, saddle leather, or the way winters bit harder up near Cold Ridge. Some days they didn't. May didn't need words. She had always known how to live in quiet, but with him, the silence didn't sting. By mid-spring, they had 2 more horses. A half-blind gelding. Ellis found limping on the trail and a stubborn mare May couldn't break, but respected deeply. She named the mare Ash. Ellis just smiled at that. "You see stories in everything," he said once. "No," May replied. "Just in scars." They didn't speak of love, not openly, not in the way folks from town might have done, with rings, or music, or dancing in taverns. But sometimes Ellis would bring her coffee just the way she liked it without asking, and sometimes she'd leave a wool blanket on his bedroll when the nights got cruel. Love, in their world, didn't need words. It needed firewood stacked, a saddle mended, a gate latch fixed. Love was survival with a second heartbeat. One evening, as they sat watching the sun bleed orange over the canyon's edge, Ellis turned to her and said, "I never meant to stay." May didn't flinch. "I figured," she said. "I was headed west. Oregon, maybe. Too much rain out there." He smiled. "I stayed because I couldn't stomach the thought of you patching that fence without me." May looked at him long and quiet. then said, "I stayed because I finally saw myself again." The ranch began to hum. Word spread that May had horses, strong ones, quietly trained, raised on mountain trails. A trader from Canyon Pass came through and bought one for $5 silver. More came after that. Not bitter ridge folk. They still crossed the street when they saw her. But drifters, riders, people who didn't care about old stories. Ellis repaired the barn roof. May started keeping a ledger. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building. And that scared her more than the guns ever had. The challenge came in early summer. Riders on the ridge. May spotted them first. 3 silhouettes against a dusty sky, paused too long to be lost. She didn't panic, just watched, waited. That night, Ellis came back late from the trading post, face grim. "We need to talk," he said. She set her cup down slow. He looked her in the eye. "Steady. Tired. One of them up there. I know him. Friend. Once. Now he's looking for me." May didn't speak. She waited. "I used to ride with a crew out of Fort Laramie," he said. "Before I came here. Not bandits. Not exactly. But we took what we wanted. Left what we didn't. When I left dirty. Owed them. Took something that wasn't mine." May stared at the fire. "What did you take?" "A man's life," Ellis said. And in the silence that followed, May didn't move, didn't recoil, didn't cry. She just asked, "Will they come for more?" He nodded once. "Then we make ready." The next few days were a blur. They sealed the barn doors, moved the horses, buried supplies in case they had to flee. Ellis taught her how to rig a tripwire. May showed him the hidden ridge path that circled behind the canyon, but it wasn't fear that guided them. It was preparation. The fire had returned, and this time it had teeth. The men came at dusk. May saw them crest the hill, 3 riders, dust-bitten, guns strapped too casual. She stood in the yard, rifle in hand. Ellis walked beside her. "You sure?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I'm done running." The leader rode ahead, broad, sunburnt, smile too wide to mean safety. "Ellis Grant," he called out. "That you?" Ellis stepped forward. "Clayton. Well, damn. You found yourself a little home." May didn't move. Clayton's eyes scanned her like a man eyeing land he might claim. "This her?" "No," Ellis said. "This is her land." Clayton laughed. "That right?" Ellis nodded. "You're not welcome here." Clayton's smile faded. "We want what's owed. And if I don't owe you any more, then maybe we take it anyway." May raised her rifle. "Try." For a moment, everything stopped. Wind, breath, even the birds held still. Then Clayton spat. "Fine. This ain't over." He turned his horse, rode off. But the message was clear. He'd be back. That night, May sat by the fire, polishing her father's old revolver. Ellis poured water over the coals, watched the steam rise. "I never wanted to bring this to your door," he said. "You didn't," she replied. He looked at her confused. "You brought me a reason to protect it." He walked toward her, crouched. "You can still ride." "Leave." All this, May touched the revolver. "No. I've left too much already." She looked up. "You leaving?" "No," he said. "Not unless you send me." She took a breath, then held out the revolver to him. "I'll need you at my side." He took it. Carefully. "I was hoping you'd say that." They didn't sleep, waited for the dawn, and when the hoofbeats came, they were ready. 3 men rode. In guns drawn, May didn't hesitate. She fired once, knocked the lead man off his horse. Ellis flanked right, using the fence for cover. Clayton charged, yelling. He reached May in seconds, tackled her to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fists flying, blood already on her lip. He pinned her once, but she headbutted him hard. He reeled back. She kicked him off. Ellis grabbed Clayton by the collar, yanked him up, gun pressed to his neck. May stood, shaking. "No more," Ellis said. "It ends here." Clayton spat blood. "You think she makes you better? You'll never outrun who you were." May stepped forward. "You're right," she said. We don't run anymore. She nodded once, and Ellis let him go. Clayton limped to his horse, glaring. You'll regret this, he growled. May wiped blood from her cheek. I already regret not burying you. Clayton left. This time. For good. The ranch was quiet again. The land seemed to breathe easier. May stood at the fence, watching the sun rise over the new paddock. Flint grazed beside Ash. 2 colts chased each other in the back pasture. Ellis walked up, coffee in hand. They didn't speak for a while. Then May said, I'm tired of survival. He raised a brow. I want living now. Ellis smiled. Then let's live. That night, she lit the fire herself. Inside the cabin they rebuilt. The wind howled. But May didn't flinch. Not anymore. The wind carried lavender that day. Not dust. It was the first time in years that May smelled something soft in Bitter Ridge. The scent drifted from the valley wildflowers below the chapel hill, where they stood side by side, just before the hour struck noon. The townsfolk gathered slowly, unsure, whispering. Some watched from porches, some peeked from shop windows. No one had ever seen Ellis Grant dressed clean, shirt pressed, hat in hand, jaw tense but calm. And no one had ever seen May this way, not since before the fire, the horse theft, the rumors. Her hair was pinned back with silver combs. Her dress wasn't white. She didn't believe in borrowed innocence, but it was new. It was hers, deep forest green, like the pines that raised her. Ellis turned toward her and asked quietly, You ready? May didn't answer right away. She looked out over the town, the hills, the lives that once shunned her. Then back at the man who waited, not to rescue her, but to stand beside her. I never needed them to see me, she said, but I want you to. He reached out, held her hand, then stepped forward, onto the chapel steps, and raised his voice so every shadow could hear. This woman saved me. The words rang clear. Even the horses paused in the corral. She built something here when the rest of us just survived, and I'm not ashamed to stand with her. I'm proud to. A silence followed, then a cough, then a single clap, from the sheriff's wife of all people, then another, and then the town, unsure, awkward, but finally beginning, joined in. They didn't marry under stained glass. They married under the stars, out on the ranch, with 2 candles lit, and a circle of horses watching. Flint whinnied once just as Ellis kissed her. May laughed, really laughed, and the sound made even the owls hush in the trees. There were no vows, just a hand pressed to heart, and a promise whispered in the language only 2 survivors could understand. Months passed. Autumn came. May taught 3 girls from town how to ride, all daughters of men who once crossed the street when they saw her. Now they brought apples and bread and left thank you notes carved into old pine stumps. Ellis dug a second well, planted sycamores along the southern fence. They built a nursery, not because May was with child, not yet, but because someday, maybe, and they wrote a name down on a piece of paper they kept above the hearth. Rhett, May's father. Ivy, Ellis's mother. One morning, as frost curled on the window, Ellis stepped outside and found her there, barefoot in the snow, eyes lifted to the ridge. What is it? He asked. May didn't turn. I'm listening. He moved beside her, quiet. To what? To everything I once tried to silence, she said. And then she looked at him, eyes calm, voice steady, and added, It's finally quiet inside. They didn't need the town to love them, but it did, eventually. Not all at once. Not loudly. But in gestures, in borrowed tools returned clean, in wedding bread left at the gate, in one old man finally tipping his hat when she passed. May forgave. None of them, but she let them exist. That was enough. They kept no portraits. Only one item hung over the mantel, the iron horseshoe Flint wore the day he came back. May never replaced him. Some horses only come once, like some loves. Years from now, a child would sit on May's lap and ask, Is it true you ran faster than the horses? And she'd grin and say, Only when I had something worth running to. Thanks for watching. If you have any suggestions to improve our videos, please let us know in the comments. We're a new channel, and your feedback truly helps us grow.